What's going on, gardeners? You probably know that filling a raised garden bed can cost you a fortune. But did you know that you can use wood logs to fill a raised garden bed, thus reducing the cost down to a bare minimum? In this video, I will show you a splendid German method that uses wood logs, branches and other organic material to build a raised garden bed that not only will reduce the cost down, but also will retain moisture well and will release some extra nutrients into your soil slowly, so you won't need to amend your raised garden bed that often. And not only that, but you will also see how this method compares to filling the raised garden beds with compost. So by request of many of you, let's dig into the main content. So, from the nation that invented rockets, Oktoberfest and schnitzels, we are lucky to have received a wonderful gardening method on how to fill our raised garden beds. Hugelkultur. But what exactly is a Hugelkultur bed? From the German word Hugelkultur, that means mound culture, or Hügelkultur, we can deduce that this method will guide us to build some sort of mound where we will plant our vegetables. And we wouldn't be that far from the truth. A Hugelkultur bed is a raised garden bed built up using logs, branches, leaves and other organic materials piled together in a mound, topped off with some compost mixed with some topsoil. Or as I call it, a slow decomposing compost pile made out of bronze material that will function as the bottom of your raised garden bed. And how will this method compare to planting your vegetables in a classically built raised garden bed filled with some homegrown compost? Last time I asked you how tall did I grow my sunflowers. So give a big thumbs up to Jim, that was the closest to the 13 feet and 7 inches with his 16 feet and 6 inches guess. So place your bets now in the comments writing compost or Hugelkultur, and let's see who will win this time. Luckily for you, I built both of them and I have planted the same vegetables at the same time in them. So after I show you how to build a Hugelkultur bed, we can compare the two methods and see the difference between them. And I promise you, you won't believe your eyes. Now, how do you make a raised bed using the Hugelkultur method? All the materials mentioned before are layered one on top of the other, where the big logs are at the bottom and the smallest leaves and semi-decomposed compost is on top. As mentioned, the main layer that will add the most to your mound is the layer of big logs that will slowly decompose over the years, releasing nutrients back to your soil and acting like a sponge, absorbing water from the bottom part and transporting it to the top, where the roots of your plants are. Depending on the size of the logs you will use, you can dig up a deeper or a shallower trench, or simply place the logs into a raised bed, like I did. Here you can lay the logs horizontally, like I did, or vertically. As I found later out, placing them vertically is slightly better, because the logs will better absorb the water where the grain is, and will easily transport the moisture to the top, to the other layers of your Hugelkultur bed. On top of the logs, there is a layer of small branches and sticks. This layer will function like a rebar mesh in the concrete, holding together the soil in place. Here try to fill all the gaps that remained when you placed your big logs. The more gaps you fill with the branches and sticks, the less soil you will later need to use. And don't worry about the roots of your plants not having enough soil, because they will find it and go around the sticks and logs. The layer that follows the branches and sticks is the layer of leaves and other organic materials. This layer will serve as an early nutrient boost for your plants, because as I mentioned, the wood in the Hugelkultur mound will decompose slowly, so you won't have that much advantage from it in the first year, if it wasn't for this layer that will decompose the fastest. Also, don't forget to push that like button Leaves and all the other organic material dip into your sticks, leaving as little gaps as possible. And the last layer of the Hugelkultur mound is the layer of compost and topsoil. This layer will serve as a foundation where you'll plant all your seeds and seedlings. This layer must be at least 6 inches tall to allow enough space for the roots of your plants. Optional here is to add some sort of mulch to cover the top layer. Now if you have the logs, leaves and homegrown compost, the only cost of this build is the raised bed, and if you build them in a mound, they can be made completely free. But there's a catch. Coming up. As you know, for every good thing about a specific method, there's a but. A but that must not be overlooked if you want to have success with the method. Like with the addition of wood to replace some soil in our beds to lower the cost of the build. That's all great, but if we do that, we can't have carrots, potatoes, or other root vegetables that require deeper soil. Another beneficial factor of the Hugelkultur bed is that will last you a few years, depending on the size of the logs you will use. And the wood is a great source of nutrients. It can hold moisture and can be a habitat for beneficial microbes. But to set in motion all the beneficial factors, it takes time. And at first, the wood will lock some of the nitrogen in the soil. Yes, after a while, it will start to decompose and will release back the nitrogen. But the first year, you can't expect miracles. And I wouldn't plant heavy nitrogen feeders into my Hugelkultur bed the first year. Adding the wood to the bottom of the raised bed can also protect your bed from rodents that can't dig through it. But if you live in an area with termites, they can nest into the wood you just placed into your bed, causing you some troubles. Now you know what is a Hugelkultur bed, how to build one, and what are all the pros and cons. But now it's time for the grand finale. How did it compare to a raised bed filled just with compost? As you saw, I planted only brassica plants in the two beds. So, 3 cauliflowers, 3 broccoli and 3 Brussels sprouts. With the first planting, the Hugelkultur bed did phenomenal. As you can see, all the plants grew bigger and better compared to the compost bed. This is because a rodent went through my compost bed, disturbing all the roots of the plants and giving them quite a hard shock. They recovered in the end, but were stunned for about 2 weeks. The crops at the end were fantastic in both of the beds. They were just a few weeks apart. That meant that the second rotation was a few weeks later than I would like it to be. When planting the plants for my second rotation, I saw the first problem with the Hugelkultur method. Some of the leaves have already decomposed and the soil compacted a little bit. So all that was left was a shallower top layer. Unfortunately, I wasn't prepared and I didn't have any compost at hand to add to it. Said that, the soil was a little bit more moist and softer than the compost bed, where it was more compact. But the compactness of the soil didn't seem to be a problem, nor the shallowness of the top layer. Because at the end, because I planted my plants a few weeks late, meant that the conditions were not favorable and they almost all died after a month or two. And I had only a small cauliflower head from the Hugelkultur bed and a few Brussels sprouts from both of them. Overall, I would say this is a good method, even if you want to start planting in the same year. Yes, it will drastically reduce the cost of your raised beds build, so you will definitely feel your raised beds cheap. Unfortunately, I didn't see any major advantages the first year comparing to my other raised beds. But I hope this will change in the upcoming years, when the wood beneath the first layers will start to decompose, releasing back the nutrients into my soil. I will closely monitor that because yes, I have 4 raised beds all filled with a different soil mix, and I'm testing to see which performs the best. So I invite you to click on the video that pop on the screen to see the other 3 ways I filled my raised garden beds. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to hear more gardening related content and to see where my small garden quest will take me. Happy gardening!